Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world, and welcome to this live webinar brought to you by Logistics Business in association with fleet management and safety platform Samsara. My name is Peter McLeod. I'm the editor of Logistics Business magazine, and as always, it's my great pleasure to host this webinar. Today, under the title of Harnessing Data and AI for Smarter, Safer Operations, I'm going to be speaking with two special guests about how businesses with fleet operations can deploy the latest technologies to not only help reduce accidents and incidents out on the road, but also to drive operational gains. I'm joined today firstly by Tony Draper. He's the Director of Health, Safety, Environment and Quality at tool equipment hire specialist Brandon Hire Station. Hi Tony, and welcome to the webinar.
Hi Peter, good to be here.
And alongside Tony today, joining me is the Road Haulage Association's Aaron Peters. It's Head of Technical Engineering and Policy. Welcome also to you, Tony, and thanks for joining us today.
Morning, Peter. Thank you for having us.
I called you Tony. I do apologise, Aaron. Now, before we get stuck in, a little bit of housekeeping. Firstly, just a quick word to thank you, the viewer, for joining us today and hopefully sticking with us for the next 40 minutes or so. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy working days. Hopefully, you'll see that you have the ability to ask our guests questions using the chat function of this Teams call. So please pop your question in and I'll do my best to ensure it gets answered within the allocated time at the end of the webinar. So to kick things off, I'll turn to you, Tony, not Aaron, especially Tony, and ask you to describe the size and makeup of your fleet, and also perhaps say a few words, if you would, about the challenges, the types of challenges you're encountering before rolling out what was in your case a solution provided by Samsara.
Yes, so Brandon Hire Station, we have approximately 500 vehicles, which are made up of predominantly a good 80% would be 3.5 ton flatbed transits, with the rest being O licensed vehicles. We've since rolled this out to our sister businesses, MEP and Torrent Trackside. The issues that we faced really were we had a high cost on insurance each year. Our incumbent provider at the time gave us very little data, and if you went by the data, you wouldn't have thought there was a problem, but the insurance was screaming something else. That was really the turning point, as in I'd used Samsara previously at a previous organisation for about 4 successful years, and then we decided to implement the same technology at Brandon. It was, I wouldn't say a long drawn out process, but it was probably anything but. It was 3 months to fit the technology to the vehicles. And after that 3-month period of benchmarking, we went live, turned on the in-cab audio, and then the results were amazing, to be honest. And it totally transformed the way that we manage our road risk facility within the business. So all in all, it's an eye-opener. It set expectation from the very outset, but also gave us some absolute data to work with, and that old saying, data drives business and data drives improvement, was absolutely spot on.
Well, that's something that we're going to be drilling down into later on, specifically around, should we say, the more human side of introducing AI-driven tools into a working environment and how that sits alongside the workforce. I know we're going to have an interesting conversation around that. So Aaron, perhaps you can set the scene a little bit for us around the sort of landscape in which we're operating. You know, the regulatory environment, some of the pressures the industry has, changing expectations of consumers and customers, and perhaps lead on to why this is a good time to be deploying some of these AI tools to help fleet management.
Yeah, no problem, Peter. Of course, we work with 8,500 members in our organisation, which range from large operators down to the one-person businesses who are driver, as well as being health and safety officer and every other cap that fits under one roof. So we're seeing a lot of demand for how to streamline their operations, how to become more cost effective, how to interrogate all of the data that is potentially available to them. So looking at the past that I come from in the haulage industry and the PSV industries, there was a lot of data there, and the telematics has got better. And over the years, systems have moved on. And what we're seeing now is people are starting to harness that data and give people an easier access route into actually determining what is at fault, who is at fault, what has gone on to contribute to that incident or to that accident. And by using these technologies, we can help prevent them. And when, as Anthony said, when you look at insurance data, the insurance policy costs can be quite high within the haulage industry. So anything that we can do to help drive that down, and whether that be a full compliance team, a full health and safety team, or the one person who's looking at his own data, it's all relevant in the grand scale of things.
So what, in your opinion, would you say are the type of incidents that gathering, harnessing, using this data can help us to reduce or eliminate?
Looking at the telematics data that can be provided, you can drill down now into the individual drivers' assessments. So you can look at the vehicle data in how the vehicle's performing and whether the vehicle is still up to the standards expected, or is there an underlying fault with the vehicle that could be causing concerns among the drivers and the office staff that are dealing with it. But you can also drill down into that driver's own data. So is there harsh braking? Is there harsh acceleration? All of the cornering figures and the G-force figures are there for everyone to see. So not only is it your tachograph that you can look at now to see, is a driver speeding? Has there been incidents of concern? But driving down them incidents and that accident data, it could just be looking at that driver, and is there a change in their circumstance that is taking their mind elsewhere while they're fulfilling their function? Have they got someone at home that they're concerned about, that they're not fully focused on the task in hand? So drilling down to that detail can sometimes raise other issues, which then can be addressed as a bigger picture scenario.
Tony, AI's coming for our jobs. I'm always looking over my shoulder, and I do. I'm old enough to remember when the tachographs were introduced, that there was pushback from drivers, the spy on the cab and all of that. So how do you manage the process of introducing this technology into the cab, and specifically around drive the sort of the soft side of communicating it to your drivers?
It's a really good question, and probably one that every business will come across when looking at this technology. Look, the workforce they're lone workers. They come in the morning, they load up, they go out. Very rarely do you see them again before they come back again. They're left to their own devices. They are professionals. However, that internal camera looking at them, they think 24/7. It does worry them, and I think we were quite acutely aware of this, and it's also, it's a big change to their working day. So one of the things that we did say, and we did set out from at the very start, was open and honest communication. And I think the one thing that we did say was, look, open up the platform. Absolutely show them exactly what it captures, what it records, when does it record it, what are the tolerances, when are we looking at the speeding, when are we looking at, at what level does the in-cab audio come in, what access do they get? So it's really imperative that the open and honest, transparent communication, this is why we're using it, this is what we want, this is what the outcomes will be, and this is where we're focused going forward. We did different training packages right the way up from drivers to branch managers to regional directors to business support guys to the fleet teams to the safety teams to HR. Everyone was on board. We clearly set out what would be a policy violation, in terms of speeding or in terms of distracted driving, mobile phone usage. We told them when it would start recording from, what we actually see. So we only see 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after. Doesn't seem a lot, but you get that snapshot of, is it a false negative or is it an actual positive? Is it something that we need to coach? And I think again, the other thing on this is be clear. We had to be clear on what the outset is. This isn't a punitive tool to discipline drivers. I'm sure, if anyone in logistics says they haven't got an issue with recruitment and retention of drivers, they're either kidding themselves or they're extremely lucky. So it is about educating and re-emphasizing good driving techniques. So, we were very clear on the outset. We were very open and honest in why we're using the technology. And, we were lucky, I say lucky. We had a couple of very strong exoneration cases at the very start of the process, which that gained a lot of buy-in. So I think, it's good prep, good comms, be open and honest.
Without giving too much away about those cases, would you say the fact that you had the technology to support the case was directly related to the exonerations?
Absolutely. Without giving keeping confidentiality and everything that goes with that, we had a case where one of our vehicles was involved in quite a serious collision in the south of England. He was charged at the scene, arrested and charged at the scene with causing injury by dangerous driving. It was only until we then downloaded the footage, presented that to the enforcement authorities, that all charges were dropped. Without that, we could have been looking at up to 5 years in prison, 2-year driving ban, and I think it comes with the mandatory enhanced retest. So, if we couldn't defend that and the driver couldn't defend it through no fault of his own, look at it from a personal driver perspective, that's his career down the drain and, prison time. So, but the technology really helped the lad. And, he was exonerated with no further action. So the power's there.
That's justification of the investment on its own. That's one example. Aaron, you sit across the industry. You've got a visibility of fleets of all shapes, sizes, and you could say variety of operations as well. What would you say have been the sort of prevalent types of incidents that the introduction over the last few years of these new technologies have helped to reduce? And do you see a sort of a widespread adoption of these technologies?
Yeah, I'd say if you look at the GSR2 regulations, which are partly implemented now, and we're expecting more to come, when it goes back to the drivers and getting their buy-in, we've got the fundamentals of GSR2 is going to have a accident recorder similar to the black box technology on all vehicles by 2029. So all vehicles that are coming onto the road are going to be fitted with it. So there's an argument that, yeah, the drivers may push back, and sometimes when you're in unionized situations, it can be a bit more difficult to get these technologies in full use. But overall, what we're seeing is a reduction in accidents. We're seeing a better standard of driving, and the feedback we're getting is the drivers are being educated more. So it's been tailored towards their driving style and what they do, because the systems are given that data to the transport managers, who are then able to do toolbox talks, actually look at accident black spots and where they need to be more cautious about what they're doing. So I think overall, it's the insurance claims that have probably seen a reduction. But as AI technology and there's more available to us, the lane departure systems, reversing aids, and everything else that comes with it, as they become more prevalent in the industry, you'd expect to see that drop further.
And so, Aaron, how would you say this has changed or shaped the role of the transport manager? Has it given them more power, or do some of them still view it as taking away some of their power?
I think it gives them more information to be able to tackle the actual issues and look at the drivers and the vehicles to say, well, actually, we know this is where the issue is coming from. It's not just a one cap fits all, that you tackle a whole array of drivers. If you've got one driver that you can see their performance has dropped, or they're having incidents of near misses, or they're having high numbers of G force alerts, then that's something that you can then address with them independently. So you're not targeting the whole workforce and potentially making people feel like they're being targeted unfairly. So I think it gives the transport model potentially more power to actually address the issues.
And Tony, within Brandon Hire Centre, have you been able to use this as a training tool just to show drivers examples of bad practice and train them more towards good practice?
Absolutely. As Aaron said, I think it's that overall picture is what you're after. So, when the events are raised and when they come through, the drivers can review these immediately, well, I say immediately, when safe to do so and in their own time through the app. So it's an absolutely open and honest transaction in terms of the event is recorded, we get it logged, the driver gets a copy, he can then review that. And I think ultimately that's been one of the biggest drivers for us. And I think it is a case of some drivers don't realise the habits they've developed over time. So they can see it in real time. They can actually put it into context. But what we get that times 500. So for us is if we're looking at training programs, toolbox talks, areas of focus, whether it be following distance or harsh turning, harsh braking, maybe it would be mobile phone usage or inattentive driving, we know what we can focus on, what campaigns we can build in. And it's just that whole beauty of you get to see the whole context. So, data does drive, it drives performance, but it does drive the training agenda as well.
And I guess, as well as all those types of bad behavior or incidents you describe, we can turn this around a little bit and say, with perhaps a nod towards gamification, you can create a league table of good behaviour. So with all that data available, are you able to incentivize drivers to be better versions of themselves?
Absolutely, and I think it's a really key point. You can use data to drive efficiency, but what you've also got is, you'll always get a proportion of your staff that are model drivers, and every fleet's got them. We've got drivers that are doing upwards of 5,000 miles a month with 100% score. We set the parameters on our safe driving scores and our eco driving scores. So we use that as our first indicator, for want of a better word, what drivers are dropping below, a certain level. But within the system itself, there is basically a reward and recognition piece within the system itself, and it will tell me who's had the longest streaks, who's had the biggest increases. So the data's continually evaluating itself to pinpoint areas of improvement, rising stars, for want of a better word. But also that gamification piece is absolutely critical because everyone wants to be the best. No one wants to be at the bottom of a list. We don't publish a list full of names, but when they go onto the driver app where they can review their events, they can also see how they're performing. And I think that's really key. And I think it's that continual development. They have their their CPC hours and they have ongoing training. But I think sometimes that self-realization of how they're performing is a really strong driver for them. So I think the system allows us to do that and allows us to reap the benefits.
I guess as a supporter of Tottenham Hotspur, you have an aversion to league tables, but we won't go into that just now.
No, exactly.
Aaron, on the sort of regulatory side of things, are these tools able to compliance is always a complicated area, but are these tools able to help businesses to steer a smoother path through all these regulations with the data they're gathering?
Yeah, a lot of the future of the industry is based on technology, and you look at how DVSA are moving on with what is an acceptable standard. So they've reviewed the guide to maintaining roadworthiness. We've got EBPMS, which has come in, which uses AI to look at how a vehicle is performing. So it's not just on a driver and a lead table that we're looking, but actually the AI data can give you information on how a vehicle's performing when it comes to fuel efficiency. Is it a certain driver is poor when it comes to fuel efficiency, or is that vehicle suffering because it hasn't had its filters changed at the correct service interval? Is your maintenance provider giving you the right level of service? So there's a lot that can play into the AI systems, and when you look at maintenance providers and how you've got to do your record keeping and everything else, AI can play a part in that, where it can automatically upload, it can save them in the right folder for the right vehicle. So when DVSA do come in, if they want to see any files, they're there, they're stored, and it's took a lot of the admin burden away from the business. So you can then redeploy the assets that you've got to do some of the work that potentially has been missed. You can grow the business, and you've got the chance to actually have that time back, which is a massive element within our industry.
Tony, I think they call them slow adapters of technology. I think they call them laggards, but I'd probably call them grumpy old men or gentlemen of a certain age. But within your organization, do you have those laggards, those who still seem to be pushing back a little bit against the technology? And then part two of the question is, tell us about some of the ones who embrace it and their sort of attitude when they arrive at work in the morning.
I wouldn't say there are laggards. I think before we implemented Samsara, there were elements that were, we've got a telematics and AI system, we don't need anything else. But as I alluded to earlier, we weren't really getting the events that came through. So it didn't justify, the numbers of events weren't justifying the cost to the business. And I think when you looked at the retraining element, we didn't have it. So I think once the system was implemented and we started getting the traction and we started seeing the reductions, all of a sudden it did pick up a head of steam. I think one of the things that we didn't expect to get from the system was some of the hidden benefits. So obviously if you're slowing down your fleet and they're driving more carefully, it's obvious now looking back, but everyone was taking more care, everyone was slowing down, but because they were doing that, fuel efficiency went through the roof. So there was a massive saving on fuel. All of a sudden there was the AI assistant that was on the platform. So because the system Samsara plugs directly into the canvas, diagnosing faults was near enough immediate. We could run a health check on our vehicles remotely. We wouldn't have to wait for that breakdown. As soon as a fault code would come up on the ECU, it's straight on Samsara. We could then diagnose that and start planning and working around that. Another one was vehicle utilization. We didn't really, when you look at, we've got 500 vehicles, but 250 smashed and 250 have an easy day. When we're looking at this, it was a rationalization of where we get our efficiencies, have we got vehicles in the right areas? And it was just the whole piece came together. So lots and lots of hidden benefits. And I think because we started getting those early wins, the laggards tended to disappear, but the innovation adopters jumped all over it. We now use this, as a lot of companies do, from as soon as they log on. Aaron spoke about driver well-being earlier. The first thing we ask is, are you okay? On the daily defecting sheet, how's things? Their driver declaration's done, their daily defecting's done. So we know if the daily defect's been done and the vehicle's moved. They're two of the key things that a transport manager wants to see. But yeah, we've just implemented this at various stages throughout the business, and we use it even outside of daily operations, just to make sure we've got that consistent health check right the way through from driver to vehicle to asset and then back home again. So it's absolutely been adopted across the business, and I think there's so many different facets that you can use it for. The training element is one thing we've looked into and we've trialed very successfully. So yeah, I think you'll find benefits wherever you look.
It's always key to remember that whatever technologies we deploy, the humans are always going to be at the heart of our businesses, and I think that illustrated that very well, Tony. back to you, Aaron. When I talk about safety in supply chain and logistics industry, you can see I've got a warehouse behind me. It's always a very hot topic in the warehousing side of our industry. There's this sort of cost versus safety versus ROI of safety. I mean, it's almost impossible to justify not investing in safety. But do you have a sort of a view on that when it comes to, there's always somebody who says, oh, I can't afford to do this, can't afford to do that.
Yeah, I think in the industry, what we tend to see is very low profit margins. So we see a lot of businesses that are running around about a 2% profit margin, which, as you can imagine, is quite a small basis to base investment on. So when you're working on them margins, you've got to see a return on it, and AI is probably one of the few parts of it that you can easily see a return, whether that be on actual being able to deploy your staff more efficiently, or whether it's efficiency savings, fuel savings, because you're monitoring the vehicles and the AI is doing the work for you. So there's a lot that can be said about that. But I think when it comes to health and safety, it's the compliance side of it there. Compliance and health and safety are often blurred lines between the two. And when you look at what AI can provide in that, in assessing what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what you should be standardized against, it gives you a lot of options to then actually, do we need to tweak our operations and work slightly differently? Because we've got the data there to back it up to say, actually, this is going to be more cost effective. It's going to deliver a better profit margin, and the investment is then worth it. So like say, the return on investment is always going to be key when you're working on low profit margins.
And sort of speaking generally about safety, and particularly road safety, could you just give us an overview of what the implications are for businesses who don't invest to ensure that they're at least legal with their compliance when it comes to safety? What can it mean for a business if, for example, they're dragged in front of a court?
I think the risk to everyone is being dragged in front of the traffic commissioner and being shown how can I operate any further if the traffic commissioner curtails my license or revokes it. And the answer is that your business gone in some instances. So what you've got to look at is where is the investment needed and what you have to do to ensure that investment is kept up to date and relevant. So all of the ADAS systems, which are now commonplace on vehicles, so lane departure warnings, and you've only got to look at London for the DVS system, the direct vision, where actually if you go into London without the direct vision system on, then you're paying a fine, which is substantial. It only takes 2 trips into London before the kit would have paid for itself, and you've got the benefits of that in the long term. So you've got to take a longer term view on where that investment comes from.
And are there sort of the invisible costs to a business as well that you could tell us about?
Of course, it's the administrative burden a lot of the time now when you're trying to look at accident figures, when you're trying to look at your insurance policies, all of that takes time, and it's time that a lot of companies would rather invest in either maximizing profitability or investing in new technologies and new ways of actual work. And so you see the iceberg effect in there's a lot of hidden cost involved in one incident, and it's the person downtime, it's the vehicle downtime, it's everything that goes with that, but it's also the reputational damage that can be caused through these incidents. So the more we can minimize the incidents and the risk to the business, and take that step back, look at the risk profile of what you do, and that's where AI can play a real part in understanding where your risk is. Is it a certain route that you do? Is it a certain roundabout that you face? Or is it actually reversing onto a loading point? So understanding that actually it gives you the chance to address the issues and minimize that risk.
And I have to say, you know, when on the subject of sort of reputational risk as well, in an industry that we're finding it increasingly hard to recruit into, if a potential new hire Googles your company and sees the first hit on Google is a local newspaper report about a court case concerning the fact that the company perhaps doesn't look after their workers in the way they should, that's not going to help the situation at all either. Tony, in the supply chain industry and logistics and transport, you know, we are generating a lot of data. Do you have any concerns around you know, data security, privacy, you know, the trust around that at all?
I think there's always a worry. I think you need to do your due diligence on, you know, what companies you're partnering with and how that data is stored and used. But I think a lot of it comes down to your own internal setups. And I think, you know, with us, you know, we were very mindful on this, where, you know, when we were looking at doing the organizational structure and, you know, if, you know, the third driver at one of our locations in the southwest, for instance, has an event, well, exactly who can see that? How is it recorded? How is it stored? How is that incident communicated? And I think the system we've got allows us to do that really effective. But again, it's the whole piece around involve the right people that's set out, and you know, when you're looking to appoint or on board your providers, just make sure you do your due diligence and make sure it's structured correctly. But no, I think these days it's a really well managed area. Predominantly, you know, mainly they know what they're doing. So yeah, I think that's the least of my worries. But I think as those internal controls are the key ones.
Around the technology, then you've seen how it can help benefit your business. You can see how it can help benefit your operations, your drivers. Is there looking ahead sort of more that you wished it could do, or that you're helping sort of to develop new areas there where the technology can help to make you even better than you already are?
Yeah, there's a few areas that we've been speaking about, and some I can speak about, some I can't. But there's, you know, there's just a few, look, some simple that, you know, the transport community would gauge as quite simple: weight restrictions and especially bridge strikes. Yeah, that's been a real big nod and a big tick in the box for us. The connected training, you know, training drivers and getting information to them has always been, as long as I've been in the industry, been an issue. You know, you need to wait until they're back in the classroom, for want of a better phrase, before you can deliver the training. The AI training that's been developed it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. You know, you can deliver that to the guys instantaneous. There's competency checks involved. We can move that forward. I think the AI piece, where the AI assistant, where we can interrogate the system very quickly in terms of driver performance, eco performance, maintenance regimes. They've brought out the lone worker solution. You know, we know what our guys are doing when they're driving. We know if the vehicle's moving. We get the snapshot internally, not all the time, but we've got it every 3 minutes, an internal snapshot, just to make sure they're okay. But they're bringing out a lone worker device as well. So when they are unloading, when they are doing other work, for want of a better phrase, there's a panic button there with them. And it's not just a panic button. They can actually speak into it, and it records and it tells and it alerts instantaneous. So there's lots of other benefits of this system, and there's lots of things that we want to push that go in paperless option, the digital forms. It all ties in and around the single product, and I think that's been a beauty for us. I think also being able to tie it in with FTA Vision. Sorry, Aaron, but tying it in with Vision has been brilliant. You know, we're going to one portal now to potentially look at our vehicle maintenance, our driver performance, our safety and eco, and our infringement management. So, you know, there's a whole host of stuff that it's bringing, and it's putting it on one portal through APIs. to make the transport manager's life so much easier, because ultimately it's a hard job, and juggling that the sheer amount of data that they do, they need to be able to pinpoint areas easily and effectively.
Aaron, for goodness sake, it's 2025 and we're still talking about bridge strikes and weight issues and width issues. Is this still a thing in the industry? And do you see technology being the answer to it?
Is it still a thing? They're very few and far between. But if you're looking at effective management, let's face it, historically it'd be you can either have commercial nav, or you can have, literally go old school with maps. But I think either or, they're taking you away from, they're more distractions for a driver. If the driver's alerted as soon as he becomes into a vicinity of a low bridge, the likelihood is that he'll take action. I think that we tend to focus on the here and now and not the whole wider piece. And I think, if you've got that system that looks at the wider piece and can enable the drivers to be as informed as they can without distracting them, I think it can only be a good thing. In previous businesses, I work with road sweepers, and road sweepers, for those that know, we used to have reversing cameras, side cameras, you'd have a control box for your sweep gear, you'd have all of this tech in the cab, and you'd wonder why the guy gets distracted. With
Yeah,
it's about making that system as easy. Rely on the driver's skills, rely on the drivers, invest in the drivers, but have that. I don't want to say it, but I've got to. It's like a guardian angel for them. If they're speeding, it slows them down. If they're too close, it will tell them. If they're distracted, it will tell them. They don't get this form of coaching anywhere else. So I think that for me, we're invested in the driver, we're invested in the business going forward, we're giving as much info as we can. While we're doing all that, we're capturing all that data, for the transport manager. The transport manager or the road risk manager, they're under, transport managers especially, are under obligations. These systems now help them fulfill their obligations. So, it's a massive step in the right direction that's only going to get bigger moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Aaron.
Sorry, I've got to agree that we've just launched our weights and dimensions survey, which is based on the new technologies that are coming in. So your electric vehicles, your hydrogen vehicles, which we know the cabs weigh more, which affects the payload. So actually, AI has a big part to play in that, of how much are people carrying, how often are they going to need to recharge, where are the recharging stations, and AI can feed into that to give us that information. And the Samsara system with the telematics can alert us to how that needs to work, how that needs to operate, and how companies are currently operating. So the survey that we're running is to try and look at, actually, do we need to relook at what weights were allowed on the road? Do we need to relook at actually heights, dimensions of vehicles to see, can we increase payload? Can we increase what an operator can do with the new technologies that are coming? So I think there's a fundamental part that AI and the telematic systems can play in that.
And Aaron, as we come towards the end of this live webinar, maybe just a general question to you about, again, it's the human side of road haulage. Are you seeing these technologies as being a way to attract talent into the industry, or maybe diversity into the industry? Or do you see technology as a way to help reduce the need and reliance on a fresh pipeline of drivers coming in?
I think we're quite a long way off any sort of technology replacing the driver. So we've got a skill shortage within the industry, and it's not just in the driving side, it's in the technology side and the technician side of it as well. So we do need to recruit in, and we need to bring in skilled workforce. The driver is the fundamental within most operations. So without the driver, how are we going to get our goods around the country? We need to focus on actually this is a better place to work. This industry is a good place to be. There's potential for growth. There's potential for people to actually move on. And you look at office staff, and a lot of the time, them office staff are ex-drivers who've decided to actually make a move. So there is progression opportunities. There is a lot of opportunities in the industry, but we need to actually bring in new blood to fulfill the needs. When you look at the age profile of drivers, these technologies are going to make it easier for the driver to fulfill their duties, but that's not the be all and end all. And as drivers retire and we bring younger drivers back in, which is what the industry needs, then they're going to be more adapted to the technologies already with what their experience is through life. So there's sort of a nice middle ground within that of we're assisting the drivers that want to stay on and want to continue working, but we're also attracting people in because they see that they can use the technologies that they've been brought up with.
Well, I'm glad to say we had a question from a viewer called David who's asking, and I'll aim this towards you, Tony, if you don't mind. Are driver league tables helpful to incentivize better driving?
Absolutely. I'll give you the brand an example. We now target our drivers on safe driving. So we've set a target on our safe driving score, and anyone above that, this is fund. Let me rewind a bit. We saved nearly £200,000 in costs last year. That was just pure accident costs. And through that, we looked at this and thought, we have some really good high performing drivers. We don't, and the league table, I say it's a league table. If they achieve above the benchmark score, we incentivize those drivers on a quarterly basis. And then from of those people that achieve the score on a quarterly basis, they then get put forward to regional driver of the quarter. And then the regional drivers of the quarter then go to our driver of the year. But I think ultimately it's twofold. One is transport companies or logistics businesses are very good at pointing the finger when it goes wrong. And we don't really celebrate our high performers. And there are a lot of high performers out there. And I think it's recognition for those guys as well. But no, I do. I'm a massive believer in the incentivizer. If the business is reaping the rewards from better driving, why wouldn't you recognise the people that are achieving that? I think there's a bit of a misconception. If a salesman goes out and lands a big deal and brings in loads of extra revenue, he gets his bonus. If your workforce are going out and using less fuel and having a better reputation for the business, and obviously bringing down insurance costs, well, why shouldn't they see some benefit within that? So I think it's huge. As long as it's fair and everyone knows the rules of engagement, I think it's only a positive.
Well, amen to that, I would say. And I would also suggest that customers of Brandon Hire Station, when interfacing with your drivers, will see safe, relaxed, protected, happy personnel as a result of the investments you've made in your fleet management and driver safety and behavioural tools. So, Tony, thank you ever so much for joining us and giving across that very fascinating and full perspective. And thank you also to you, Aaron, for joining us. And I would encourage our viewers with fleets to engage with the RHA and the extraordinary resources they have at their fingertips and on their website, and also the benefits it can bring to your business. I'd also like to thank you, as always, the viewer, for joining us today for this latest webinar from Logistics Business and from Samsara. More information at samsara.com. As well as visiting our channel on YouTube, where a recording of this webinar will be posted. Please, A, like and subscribe to increase our visibility, and B, check out our growing archive of material. Also, whatever your podcast channel of choice, please subscribe to Logistics Business Conversations to make sure the next edition is delivered straight to you as soon as it's released. Until then, it's goodbye from Tony.
Thank you. Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from Aaron.
Thank you and goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me, Peter McLeod. Goodbye, and thank you for joining us.